Now I would like to request David Rosenberg to say about the Palestinian movement and left's participant in this movement, and he will also tell about the importance of this Hanbury Street, the radical history of Hanbury Street. David Rosenberg.
Thank you very much. And I bring greetings from the Jewish Socialist Group, a group that was formed in the 1970s, which identifies with a long tradition of Jewish working class struggles and Jewish socialist struggles that goes back at least to the 1890s, also importantly around here in the 1880s, just a few doors from here, at number 22 Hanbury Street. There's a building, it was once a Huguenot church, but in that period, if you had an issue and you wanted to tell lots of people about it and get them organised about it, you'd print off leaflets saying, come to a meeting at Christ Church Hall, also known as Hanbury Hall, just a few doors down. And all kinds of people, Eleanor Marx, Emma Goldman, Annie Besant, important figures spoke there at really important rallies. And even today, you can still see where the floor and the gallery above was in that building, although the top of it is now luxury flats. So the place where people fought for socialism, the place where people fought for working class struggles, that's now a building that is housing the wealthy. But hundreds of people would go to meetings there, and they would then tell their neighbours, tell their work friends what's going on and help build the struggles. But I want to go back to Eastern Europe, because most Jewish people in the world in the late 19th century were in Eastern Europe, in the Russian Empire, which was ruled over by the Tsars. And the Jews there were oppressed. They were oppressed there as workers and exploited, and also discriminated against and persecuted as Jews. So both those issues. And they created their own organization to challenge that. It was called the Jewish Workers' Bund. And Bund is a Yiddish word that means union, like trade union. And they fought every day against anti-Semitism, but also joined forces with other workers outside their own community to fight for a better world for all, where all would be equal. And the Bund was an internationalist movement and an anti-nationalist movement, declaring wherever we live and work, that's our country. Yeah? We don't need to go somewhere else to have our own country. Where we live right now, that's where we work, that's where we struggle. This is from a May Day statement of the Bund in 1908. The 1st of May is the bridge between ourselves and the future. Let's meet the great holiday of the proletariat, not with the dangerous indifference of the defeated, but with the joy of victory of tomorrow. But they were not the only ones organising in that time. And in Western Europe, at the end of the 19th century, where anti-Semitism was also strong in Germany, France and Britain, a different movement was formed by a man called Theodor Herzl at a conference in Switzerland, which also aimed to end anti-Semitism. But the way he wanted to end it was a very different way to the way the Bund approached things, because he wanted Jews to be nationalists and to create their own Jewish state. And various locations were talked about, but they decided that Palestine, where a small Jewish community had lived over the centuries, generally in peace with its neighbours, that was where they wanted to have a Jewish state. Now, before the Second World War, before the Holocaust, this movement, Zionism, was a minority among Jews in every country. After the Holocaust, after the Nazi Holocaust of 6 million Jews, with survivors languishing in displaced persons camps, and who the Western world did not want to take as refugees, the demands of Zionism for a Jewish state were beginning to win more support among Jews and non-Jews. And in the meantime, many Jewish refugees were reaching Palestine legally or illegally. Most members of the Bund, the very progressive organisation I was telling you about, were murdered in the Holocaust. But those that survived continued to oppose a separate Jewish state. In 1947, the United Nations agreed to partition Palestine. The surviving Bundists argued instead for an independent Palestinian state that would belong to Arabs and Jews who live there, with freedom and equal rights for all its communities. But Israel was created through a massive injustice to the Palestinians, a war of independence that destroyed Palestinian villages, drove 750,000 Palestinians out, and treated the Palestinians who remained as second-class citizens. But even after Israel was created, it had its own internal Jewish opposition against nationalism and expansionism. In 1967, when Israel, under the war, occupied the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, just a few weeks after that, Jewish left-wing people in Israel published an advert in a liberal newspaper there, Haaretz. And these are the words of that advert, because I think they're very pertinent to today. It says, "Our right to defend ourselves from extermination does not give us the right to oppress others. Occupation entails foreign rule. Foreign rule entails resistance. Resistance entails repression. Repression entails terror and counter-terror. The victims of terror are mostly innocent people." And this is the particular line. "Holding on to the occupied territories will turn us into a nation of murderers and murder victims. Let's get out of the occupied territories immediately." It's an incredibly powerful sentence. And in the light of 7th of October 2023, the Hamas massacre of civilians, followed by Israel's 18-month continuing genocidal war of retribution, the carpet bombing of Gaza, withholding and blocking of food aid, pogroms by settlers in the West Bank, we should reflect on the words in that advert. The protest movement here around Palestine in the wake of the war on Gaza has been incredible. It has grown in the face of demonization in the press, politicians and far-right activists who have been determined to brand our marches as hate marches or glorification of Hamas. We know it's a lie. The vast majority of those who take part in the marches are motivated by love. Love of freedom, love of justice, love of equality. The protesters have been young and old. They've been multicultural, spirited and peaceful, despite provocations from the police and counter-protesters. But what has also been remarkable in those protests are the growing number of Jewish people taking part in a unified Jewish bloc. On the first march after 7th of October, we had perhaps 70 to 80 Jewish people there together. But as the protests became more frequent, those numbers grew very rapidly. On at least 4 occasions, we've had more than 1,000 Jewish people in our bloc on the Palestine marches, from about a dozen different Jewish organisations. And there have been Jewish speakers on the platform of every national demonstration for Palestine. Many of those marching have been first-time demonstrators against the Israeli government. And on those marches, the interactions between communities, especially between Jews and Muslims on the marches, has been remarkable. And we're strengthened too by the knowledge that there are similar blocs formed in other countries, particularly in America. And we know that as well as challenging the actions of the Israeli government and military there are now more Jewish people in the world challenging Zionism as an ideology than at any time since 1948. And we are strengthened also by the actions of protest by Israeli leftists today, where possible, in co-protest with Palestinians. And we are inspired by the growing number of younger Israelis who are refusing to be conscripted into the army. That's, to me, a really important thing. Finally, however terrible current circumstances are, we must not lose hope. We must not lose hope in a brighter future. And we can play our part in that by giving solidarity internationally and by fighting for social justice and against racism and fascism here in Britain. And as the Bund, the group that I was talking about at the beginning, in their spirit of them, they always said, we are always with the oppressed, never with the oppressors. Thank you.